Welcome back to another episode of the Thunderstock Show, a collection of valuable brainstorms to enhance your life, liberty, and pursuit of property. Today's guest is Stefanie Curtis. Stefanie is the CEO and founder of Pace Creative Group. It's a full-service B2B Marcom agency. We met quite some time ago when I first started my fractional CMO career. We have a lot to talk about today in terms of what is and what is not a true fractional CMO, what AI can do and what it still can't do and probably never will be able to do in terms of the fractional marketing workspace. And we're going to learn a few things that Stefanie's picked up along the way. So buckle up. Stefanie, first question that I have for you is, before you became a Marcom extraordinaire, what did you want to be when you grew up, when you were a younger girl?
Yeah, it's a good question. I tend to ask that question in interviews for my team. So that's a good question. What I wanted to do, I always wanted to be in business. I did not know what type of business, and I didn't have a specific idea in mind, but I knew I was always going to be in business. So my family has been in business for 5 generations, so I knew it was going to be business. I just did not know what form. My family has been retail for a long time. I knew retail was not really what I wanted to do. And then went to business school, graduated, and was looking at opportunity to start a business.
So business of some sort. And you said your family has been in 5 generations in business and primarily in retail. What was
Yeah.
that like growing up?
So that looked like a lot of family dinners talking about business. And it's also about inventory and cash flow and budgeting, traveling to get inventory, first in, first out, things like that. It's lots of fun.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to a degree. I had a family of entrepreneurs as well. I don't know how many generations were in a local service business that became a gift shop, a restaurant, and a pharmacy. I was named, my first name was actually John. I don't know, 6 generations or so, the person that started it. Then my generation did not participate. And then on the other side was commercial real estate. So I heard a lot of B2B sales that I didn't realize was B2B sales around the dinner table, car rides. For some time, take your kid into work day growing up was just me hopping in the car and meeting people who I had no idea who they were. Apparently they owned businesses with properties, and just hearing the back and forth of negotiation. Didn't feel like work. And I always kind of grew up knowing I wanted to do something that didn't feel like work either, but it does feel like work now as an adult. Surprise. So did you get started in retail, or what did you do after college?
That's
After
a good
school?
question. During college, I had a bunch of jobs, one of which was a manager at a retail store, a cashmere store. So very, very niche. So I love niche businesses in general. Did that for a while. I think a few years, actually, 5 years. I did work in a bakery. What else did I do? Oh, yeah, and I was working actually for another retail store in maternity clothing. So again, very niche. And then I realized I did not want to do retail.
Well, better to learn that sooner than later. Now, another question. I also have family roots that are in Canada that have done some international business. What are some of the differences between doing business in Canada and then international with the United States? Culturally or philosophically, what are some of those key differentiators?
I think the first one is attaining financial, like capital. The way capital, access to capital in Canada is very difficult versus the United States. And so that I think is a bigger, at the foundational at the foundational level, I think that's the biggest difference. So from there, the way, Canadians look at businesses and growth is quite different. It's very risk averse.
Mm.
And so, yeah, but I think at the end of the day, I think it comes down from access to capital.
Interesting. I never thought of it that way, but I guess that would definitely make sense. What was the first time that you realized marketing and communications was going to be the route? Obviously you knew not retail, but then how did you make the decision on the other end?
I love the love your questions. Okay. So it was actually life in a way. So I'll give you an example. So my first agency, Pace Creative is my third agency. The first agency was a production agency. Over 90% of agencies out there are production, which means you call them in, they want a website, someone wants a website, and the client turns as a project manager, strategist, SEO expert, copywriter, creative director to get the project done. So that was my first agency. The second agency was a digital agency working only with Fortune 500 companies wanting to grow and doing product launches. So that's really where the experience came from. And then in around 2010, one of our agents, we were the agency of record for GE Healthcare. And GE came to us and said, look, we are going to invest in thought leadership and content marketing. Do you guys want to come on board? And we're like, yes, we do want to get on board. We want to learn and master it with you. And so we mastered it from a B2B standpoint and a B2C standpoint as well. And then a couple years in, we looked at each other with a strategist and we're like, this is the future of marketing communication. This is how brands will be able to, this is how you build excellence, and this is how a brand can actually stand out, among the noise and the crowd. And so we created Pace Creative from it.
Fortune 500. That is a different take than a lot of people that get started with marketing agencies. Do you still work with those types of companies, or are you looking for smaller, still with those big Fortune 500 firms?
Yeah.
Interesting. What do you like about working with them? What's the attraction?
So there's a few things. So first of all, I just want to back up in saying that we work with Fortune 500 in many different ways. So we're very flexible. We're here to fill in the gaps in expertise, or when they're just too busy, right? So for instance, we worked with Salesforce 15 years ago on building some of their sales enablement tools. Today, we work with Salesforce on their partner programs. So very different. So over the years, things have changed. We also work with some of Fortune 500 on their lead gen campaigns, very specific campaigns, very targeted to a vertical and a specific service. And that's what we do. So it's fun that way. In a way, it's ongoing work. We know, they have business goals to attain, and we'll be working on the lead gen campaign for some of them.
Yeah, one thought that comes to mind working with those types of businesses, it would be advantageous when you delineate yourself from the other 90% of marketing agencies, wherein you do strategy. They have the budget that they can afford to hire for strategy, as opposed to many small businesses. They really want miracle workers. So someone that can do all of the different positions and think strategically and, graphic design and copyright, et cetera, et cetera. So what about your specific lane do you think that is a misconception to other marketers?
Yeah.
Where if someone's been a marketer for, say, 10 years and they've been doing social media ads, and they're like, I could be a marketing strategist, holistic B2B campaign strategist. Like, what would you tell them in no uncertain terms?
So I would just, from my perspective, working with Fortune 500 companies, I would say that the main difference between a Fortune 500 company and maybe a smaller company is that they're very strategic led. So everything that they do stems from strategy. That's the root of everything they touch. So it's not about having more budget. It's about being super focused from everything that they touch or they engage in or invest in. So that's the main difference. It's purposeful, it's strategic, it's focused. And I think that's where they win. I really believe that. And I think every company can do it. I don't think it's only Fortune 500. It's just the Fortune 500 have had that that framework for success for a long time, and they don't deviate from it. Strategy leads planning, and then planning leads execution.
It's an interesting frame. It's not that because they're a larger company, therefore they have more budget. It's because they focus on strategy, therefore they're a larger company.
Exactly. And
Interesting.
I saw it. I saw their budget. They don't have more budget than most people. In fact, I would say they have less budget. I would say they're quite greedy, actually. They're very close to their money, but they want to make sure every single penny will get an ROI on it. And again, they measure success, they look their benchmark results, and they own it.
Yeah, there's so many other questions I could follow up with, but what was the period of time where you knew, all right, this is my ideal client profile? Like you became certain that you stopped looking around, right? And saying, well, what if it's somebody else? How did you know?
Oh, it took a lot of work. It's been ongoing, working on the ICP, reflecting on it, and refining it. And it's something we refine on a quarterly basis. So it's like ongoing work on a perfect ICP at Pace Creative. And the reason is we've been in business for 12 years. We are a boutique style agency. We don't want many clients. We just want our perfect type of clients that we know we can help and help exit and add value along the way. So a lot of our clients do hire Pace Creative because they do want to exit or part of their exit readiness. They want to add value to their business through investing in marketing and communication. They want to stand out. They want to stay focused on specific initiatives and a specific roadmap. And they usually, funny enough, on their last exit. Not always, but often.
Yeah, it seems like once you've once you've figured it out for Pace Creative, it's a heck of a lot easier to figure it out for everyone you work with. I think one of the struggles that other marketing agencies, whether it's production or strategy, this problem does not discriminate. Is reminiscent of a phrase, it's hard to read the label from inside the bottle, where a lot of people they might do great strategic work for their clients, but when it comes to doing the same strategic work of ICP creation, identification, a lot of businesses struggle. So I thought it was worth diving into that topic because that's a common issue I find. One of the things that you've done is you've bridged the gap between super niche physical product and then you've gotten more and more conceptual. So from retail then to digital agency where you're building, websites, delivery, and then you're delivering strategy. So it's almost in a lot of ways from a tactile perspective, opposite ends of the spectrum. What's been some of the biggest challenges with communicating that which you do? Because if somebody can feel, touch, see, sense what you're doing, it's a different marketing and sales strategy, I find.
I totally agree. I think it's all around value-driven messaging, right? Really focus on the impact of the work that we do versus the efforts. And so that has been, again, something that we've been working on for a long time. And I would say again, it goes back with our ICP. The type of clients that we work with are typically M&A and have an M&A background or business consultant background. Not all, but a lot of them do. And so they do understand impact versus effort. And so we very much align from that perspective. But even though that's the case, I would say some of them have made mistakes in hiring, the agency that was not the right partner or the right fit. And so when they actually met Pace Creative or our team, then they realized, okay, like this is it. This is the agency I've been looking for a while. And the nice thing with our clients is they want to learn. So, they know marketing communication is not their area of expertise and they do want to delegate it. However, it's very much of a collaborative effort and we want our clients to learn the logic of how we align branding with communication strategy to create marketing assets to support the sales team. And I find that is where we add a lot of value to our clients, but also build a very strong relationship because then they realize, okay, this is it. This is how it gets done. I get the logic now. I'll never make the same mistake again. I will not go after the shiny object. And I will stay focused on, a framework that sounds maybe boring and maybe not logical to start, but it is impactful.
Yeah, you mentioned aligning marketing and sales. What are some of the things that marketers get wrong in their pursuit to align marketing with sales? Because I see it time and time again where the marketing team and the sales team are at odds. Sales team points the finger at marketing and says, these leads are terrible. That's why sales are down. And marketing says, we've gotten you so many leads. You're just not working them. And that's why sales are down. So how do you make peace between these departments?
So first of all, I would say that I'm reading this book, and this problem is not a new problem. This book I've used on the 70s. This is what I'm reading right now. This book
Uh,
is from the 70s, and in the book, I kid you not, it says exactly that. The sales team says, if I have to count on the marketing team to get me leads, I'll be starving, or we will be starving. So what I'm telling you is the odds from the conflict between marketing and sales team is not a new one. What's shocking is that after 50 years almost, if not more, we've not been able to align the two departments and get to marry them. And yet there is a way. Again, the Fortune 500 companies have figured it out. And it's really at the stem of building the strategy. Sales and marketing have to work with the same playbook and work from the same playbook. And so I think the biggest problem that I see is silos. You know, you have the sales team and you've got the marketing team. And here's the difference between Canada and the US. You asked early on how you expand a company in the US versus Canada. In Canada, oftentimes a business is expanding through sales. So they have a sales team, not even a sales strategy, a sales team. They may get lucky or not. They may experience growth. And then eventually they realize, well, you know, we spend a lot of efforts for so little return. Maybe it's time to look into marketing. Okay, this is in Canada. In the US, Fortune 500 companies, they actually start with market fit, which is communication strategy. Then they build marketing assets. And then they start looking at building their sales team. So the framework is quite different, but it is one that has the most impact.
So many thoughts. First thought is when I think of strategy, one of the terms synonymous comes to mind is prioritization. Do you lean more towards market fit, communication strategy, then once you have demand, hire sales? Or do you use the frontline sales team to then inform or determine market fit, communication strategy? For those listening, Stephanie's shaking her head, so she has an answer. But I'm curious to hear what you have
So
to
I
say
think it
about
comes
that.
down again, it comes down to access to fund, right? Access to capital. So the first one is if you have access to capital, it's a no-brainer. You would do the first one, right? You do the communication strategy. The communication strategy comes from data and research, right? So that will give you all of the insight you need to see if there is a market fit and who's your, you know, who's the perfect target market, what's the best way based on, you know, validate the business model, validate the market fit, any assumptions, and then move on to starting to build marketing assets. So we never, you know, at the early stages, we only actually built very few marketing assets. We're in the business of less is more, not in the business of building the entire marketing funnel and, you know, everything from the get-go. No, we have to test the messaging, we have to and then this is where the marketing team comes in, right? That first marketing salesperson comes in. Because that's when we actually test the messaging, we test the market fit, and then the sales team gives us feedback. From the feedback, from the data, then we start building out the entire the sales funnel with marketing assets.
One of the common questions I get, because I work with business owners that are much smaller than Fortune 500. I come from small entrepreneurial business. I've worked with some that are, you know, several hundred cent a million to someone's retirement business for like a lifestyle, wide gamut. And I like to work with business between 1 and 40 to 50 million revenue, depending on the industry, that are heavily invested in poised for growth. And one of the common misconceptions I get around strategy is they think that in a 15 to 30-minute conversation that I can just tell them what to do. And one of the challenges that I've been working since I became a fractional CMO is to explain the process of how I arrive at the deliverable of a marketing strategy, which would be a fully thought out, cogent plan from where they're currently at, really actually historical research from what they've been doing for as long as they've been in business, and then where they're currently at and then where they want to go. It doesn't take 30 minutes. It's not, I can't just say, oh, of course, the answer is Facebook ads. Duh. But I think some people expect that to be the answer. And what they're shocked at is if we take 3 or 4 hours just communicating the marketing strategy, that doesn't go into creating it or researching it or anything else, you know, tailoring it. People are like, oh, that's very expensive. Why don't I just hire a production company to go and give me a thing? And it's just like, what is your response to that? Because I see you smiling and shaking your head. This is one of the problems that I would love if we could help solve for the whole world.
Well, there's a difference. I think it just explained to you the difference already when my first agency is very different from today's agency, right? We were just doing production. Production means, and a lot of companies try to save money. Again, they're looking at the effort, not the impact, right? So when you talk about hiring a fractional CMO to put a marketing roadmap to increase the impact and focus instead of focus on the effort, that's in my mind, that's the right way to go. Production agency, again, 90% of agencies are their production, which means the owner, whoever is leading the marketing, is going to have to direct, that agency. and tell them what to do along the way. And if they're not marketing expert, let's say it's the blind leading the blind, so you're really worse off. So you think you're saving money, but actually you're probably hurting yourself and your business quite a lot along the way.
And you made an interesting point. It's very much that industrial revolution, post World War II factory mindset of 3 8-hour shifts per day and how many units over time can we produce. And it's just like with marketing strategy, if you were to operate that way, one, I think that you'd have pretty stressed out, burned out, low performing, anxiety ridden strategists. And two, if your sum of units created of, like, let's say a quarterly or yearly marketing strategy is one, why wouldn't you want to take your time and identify what, just say, hey, regardless of the input, whether we do this in 10 hours or 100 hours, you know, you still want the marketing strategy, right? You don't need 100 of them, within a 40-hour work week. And I think what, you know, we're arriving at a similar conclusion of it's a philosophical mindset shift
Yep.
where productivity does not equal leverageable thought leadership.
And I agree that I want to add a lot of, I have a lot of things to add to this. As you were speaking, because again, strategy for us takes literally 3 or 4 weeks to put together. We document the strategy for our clients. It's a one-time fee. Again, it's a strategy, right? So it's not a fractional CMO in my mind doesn't do strategy work. That's a strategist. And again, there's confusion out there of what a CMO, a fractional CMO does versus a strategist, someone who spends time writing a report, basically based on data insights. Yes, they work in collaboration with a fractional CMO, but they also work in collaboration with a digital marketer and an SEO specialist for thought leadership. And, who knows who else on the marketing team as a marketing function within the marketing function. So, it's a team effort. It is not a solo, it's not just one person working on that document. And what you see out there right now, especially for medium-sized companies, is the lack of documents and documented strategy. And so as they want to grow and add people or members or resources to their team, it actually, again, defeats the purpose because it's not documented. And so you have team members coming in with different levels of expertise, coming in with ideas. And and they entertain it because, again, nobody's leading the marketing. No, it's not documented. So nobody has a clear direction on how to go about it, the ICP, the person, how the ICP is converting to a persona and all of that. And aligning the sales cycle, aligning, the content that needs to be communicated at what time in the sales cycle. And so all of that, if not documented, can create a lot of what I call distractions. You can call it noise, or you can call it, what I call it distraction. Basically, you're welcoming ideas, and most of the time, the idea is not going to be on point. It's not purposeful. There's a lack of focus.
Yeah, I find that marketing is different than, say, medicine or law, wherein anyone that can read or write thinks that they can be a marketer. Whereas lawyers may not have that same issue. But like you said, there is a discernible difference between somebody that's throwing random acts of marketing against a wall and to see what happens versus somebody that creates, and not only creates, but manages the marketing strategy and the plan. In your mind, this is probably the most important question I'll ask this whole week. What is a CMO? And more importantly, what is not a CMO?
I think we touched on that quite a bit. So, and the CMO to me is someone who can actually speak the language of the executive team, who can actually put together, look at the business plan, ask the questions about the business, the vision for the brand, where the business is going, talk to other executives at the table, and really align the marketing efforts with the goal of the business. That's on the high level. That's in my mind what a fractional CMO does or should do. From a tactical perspective or, deliverable perspective, I think for me, the fractional CMO should really focus on putting that roadmap. And it's a high level roadmap again, but the roadmap helps stay focused on priorities. And I think you mentioned that before, but I totally agree with that. And also communicating and educating on what it actually takes, what type of expertise is needed to actually complete every single initiative. Again, the marketing is a function. It's usually 20 to 27, could be 20 up to 27 people on the marketing team, and each one can have their own areas of expertise, right? So it can take a lot of people for one initiative, and so it's really then talking about educating, talking about what the initiative, is it a long-term initiative? Is it a strategy for long-term impact, or is it a quick win? And what it entail, and the cost, the short-term cost versus the long-term cost, things like that, right? So I think that is really at the core. I think a fractional CMO is really about educating, communicating with the executive team, and making sure there's alignment across the different function within the executive team. And also understanding what marketing does and doesn't do, right? Oftentimes we get confused between, and I was in a role with a client recently, and he thought marketing was doing business dev and sales. And I'm like, no, it just doesn't work. But they wouldn't see the difference, and they're not the only ones, right? So there's that too to communicate and educate on. So that's
It
just an example of, in my mind, what a CMO, fractional CMO does. And the other thing that I think is very important from a fractional CMO perspective is also it's explaining how marketing budget should be put together. So my joke is, what's your marketing budget? And so they say, oh, nothing, we've not. So how long have you been in business? Well, I've been in business for 5, 6, 8 years, where I never had a marketing budget, never had marketing. Okay. And so I said, so what's your revenue? So they gave me the revenue number. And so, well, you owe me 15% of your revenue for the past 6, 7 years you've been in business, and they don't like it. But what I'm saying is you have to, there needs to be a budget. And so they need to find a way to put a budget within the business for different functions: sales, marketing, operations. Otherwise, it's a job. It is not a business. And so, and then the next thing I do is I look at pricing and pricing strategy. Oh, but Stefanie, I cannot raise my price. Why you cannot raise your price? Oh, my clients will never pay for it. And I'm like, well, then there's a communication strategy, right? We need to look at the messaging. If
Yeah,
you're,
how do
and
you
you're,
know they will never pay for it? Can you show me the
well, there's
data?
this feeling they have, but as an owner, and I think,
Hmm.
we can both speak to this, right? There's this, like, you're making the assumption that the client won't pay for it. It turns out, and I know that if they're happy with the value and if they're happy with the product and the service, most likely they'll have no problem paying for more if it's well communicated.
It's so interesting. One of the common and probably incredibly fun exercises that I do as a fractional CMO, and what you touched on, is assisting with other members of the leadership team to then determine what that marketing budget should be. And I I, I did this today. I said, look, how granular do you want to go? Because you could do it as a function of your top line revenue, whether that be, and I told them, it said, depending on the industry and your growth cycle, said, I like to work with aggressive growth companies. You identify as such. That's the floor is 10%. I've seen up to 22%
That's correct.
of top
That's
line
correct.
revenue. Average for aggressive growth, B2B, 15 that
That's
I've seen.
correct.
And I said, so, okay, so we don't want to do that. I said, okay, well then let's do some math. What revenue figure do you want to get at in 12 months? And they would say X. And I said, okay, what's your average deal size? And they would say Y. I said, okay, what is your close rate? And then they would say Z. And it says, okay, so then you need, based off of all the data we have available, this many, let's say, website visitors equals this many form fills that convert to this many marketing qualified leads that show up to the meeting. And then you have this many proposals sent, and your close rate of proposals sent to client close is this. I said, so based on your historical, if we don't improve any of these steps along the way, it would cost you this much to get to this place. And I feel like my younger brother was a math professor to these people. They're like, oh my gosh. And it's like, but there's more. If you improve any of those steps along the way, it gets cheaper and you can get under budget. That takes time and market research. How do you, and then people, if they glaze over like deer in the headlights, like I don't follow the track, I'm just like, okay, 15% of your revenue. Okay, great. And then if you can deliver the goal with less budget, you win. Or if you can go over revenue target with the same budget, you win. I like playing that game. What are your thoughts on budget creation and how you approach it
So I'm
or
very similar
communicate?
to you. I'm trying to keep it simple. So again, a lot of the companies that we work with, so the least I would say, so we work in general with very sophisticated executives, right? But they are oftentimes put in a situation where there hasn't been any precedent. So they know the benchmarks, but they just want someone like a fractional CMO to remind them or to confirm the benchmarks, right? So they can go to their boards and just, get that approved. So that's usually so it's similar to you, and I love the way you explain it. But usually I can just talk about, benchmarks and average, their budget. If they want to talk about marketing and sales budget, we can talk about that as well. And those are the ones, the executives that are the most sophisticated. The ones who have never had a marketing budget, it's a bit like you. It takes a lot of conversations. And again, this is where they need a fractional CMO. This is not a one-time conversation and, on a kickoff call or on an intro call. I don't think that's what it is. It's truly like really working with the numbers, looking at their pricing, looking at their margins, looking at the business as a whole, looking at opportunities or not, or lack of. I'll give you an example. One of potential clients, we realized early on they don't have the right business model. Just within conversations, right? But business model is not my business. I'm on the marketing side. So all I can do is identify a gap and make an introduction to somebody in my network that maybe can talk through the business model with that potential client and try to help them out early on, before they hire marketing or fractional CMO to help them build the demand.
Yeah. And like you said, a lot of times for the more unsophisticated or maybe the more newer entrepreneurial scrappy,
Ex-
when you talk to them and like this is a great example of using the same conversation today. It's like, all right, we're doing a marketing campaign for a service that cost, let's say $300,000 to do. Great. When we do the math based off of the marketing budget and it says your average order, because you had so many of the small ticket, is $80,000, or let's say 320 is a target. And they're like, oh, well, in order to break even on the proposed marketing budget, we would need to do, you know, this much in additional. So it's 4 deals. And I'm like, or you're telling me that I just need to get you one of your proposed ICP to close and we hit budget. I was like, that's a piece of cake. Could probably do that in 90 days if we execute appropriately. And then you just start to see people's light bulb go off. And it's like, look, I love the phrase, a goal without a plan is simply a wish. And most people just wish for sales to increase. But it's like,
Yes.
let's build you that roadmap so that you can realize that it's much like driving a car from point A to point Z. As long as you don't crash and as long as you don't get a flat tire, get pulled over, you can reliably get there with this much time to the destination that you want to. I don't know. I love the analogy of the GPS with the marketing roadmap because a double entendre play on words. But it also 90% of people I talk to that drive, excluding like my parents, use a GPS when they're going to a new place. So why not use a marketing fractional CMO if you're trying to get to a new level in business?
So, but you see, also, going back to fractional, what they do and don't do, I think there's a lot of confusion about what a fractional is, what they do, and what they don't do. And I also think the role of a fractional CMO changes based on the size of the company and the maturity of the company, right? We don't act the same way. We don't do the same type of roadmap if it's a scale up versus a mature or growth business or a mature business, right? Or, right now we're working with a client who's actually, launching a new product line, for instance. Well, they established, but so it's a new, it's kind of a startup, but it's not, right? It's a new business that we have to bring to market, and we have 5 years for it. So we have a timeline and we have a target to reach. But we act a little differently. That's what I'm trying to say. But I find I've heard fractional CMO doing, for instance, social media posts. And I'm like, well, I don't think that's what the role of a fractional CMO is. And as a client, like, I don't understand what social media is marketing. Like, yeah, but I don't think that's the role of a fractional CMO. Maybe it's the role of a fractional social media manager or coordinator or something else, but maybe not a fractional CMO.
Yeah, that is an amazing point, and I want to talk to you about that, is how important it is for people out there to be careful with how they label themselves. I think if somebody were to say, I'm a fractional product strategist, or I'm a fractional go-to-market strategist, or I'm a fractional social media manager, those things all have inherent value. And they might be way more accurate depending on what it is that your experience is. When I first started as a fractional CMO, I was, never out in the market as a solo owner. I've always had business partners. And I was really worried that everyone else in the market had a similar background as me, wherein I was a CMO of a private equity firm that had 7 M&A transactions. And I had these portfolio of the holdco and the assets that kind of manage a cogent strategy around. But I thought everyone else had way more experience and I was just, inexperienced compared to the marketplace. And that was my disadvantage. Wrong. The biggest competitor that I found was people that worked in companies as a brand manager or worked in marketing agencies as a paid ad manager or did sales for a company and then they wanted to get into marketing, so they call themselves as such. It was mislabeled. Fractionals was my biggest competitor, and then I had to communicate to people that no, this is why I call myself a fractional CMO. What are your thoughts on the label fractional CMO and how can people better serve themselves in the industry by being accurate in how they communicate who they are?
So I'm very much aligned with what you're saying. I see it a lot. I was even part of a group of fractional CMOs, and I was shocked to see the background and the lack of experience they had. Oftentimes you hear, "Oh, I was a graphic designer turned fractional CMO," or "I was a copywriter turned fractional CMO," or "I was a strategist at an advertising agency turned fractional CMO." And I think you alluded to that, right? And so I think that there's a lot of that. And then you also have the true fractional CMOs of the corporate world, right? The Fortune 500 got those, they know how to communicate with the board. They know how to communicate with executives, right? And so you got those as well, which are great. And then you've got in between, right? Again, a fractional CMO. I actually personally believe that unless you're quite medium size, you don't really need a fraction. A fractional CMO is good enough. You need a fractional CMO, someone leading the marketing function until it's set, the roadmap is there, it's clear, it's working, and then you can start looking at adding people to the marketing function that have very specific roles to build on the roadmap, right? To follow the roadmap and build on the foundation. That's what I believe. And if that's the case, then unless you're in the PCG, which is not my role, I'm not in the PCG, I'm really working on the B2B side. We have clients who are $1 billion company. They've never had a marketing function. We as Pace Creative no, they have no one. They have no one on the marketing side. So it's really Pace Creative doing the fractional CMO, put the roadmap with the commercial team. It's been absolutely amazing. We're getting great impact, and we're being extremely efficient and effective. Actually, in fact, we're being effective first and now efficient. And then for the first time, they actually brought in their first communications person, in-house corporate communication and marketing person. And she's not a performance marketer. So again, there is, we have to work with that person and to build the team further, which is a need, right? That they didn't have anyone for corporate communication marketing. It's definitely needed. But that's a good example of what we can do with, again, it's all about doing the least amount of work to get the most impact, which is, I believe that's at the core of any executive should be working on, and a fractional as well. That's what I believe. Yeah. I know.
T- 10 out of 10 for those that are listening. Stefanie stuck the landing. Perfect quote there. I would rather be measured on the leverage that I create for an owner than the effort that I display, because I have seen time and time again a disconnect, a lobotomy of sorts between how hard I work and sweat and stress and hourly put in to how many results I get that feel natural and just like, oh, duh, light bulb. So leverage, I think, as a force multiplier between, an exponential difference between the inputs versus the outputs. So think of it like, perfect example. I built my 3-year-old's first bike this weekend, and I went to put the training wheels on. And at first, I thought I could thumb screw it, and got to a certain point. But if someone would try and get on that bike, it'd probably collapse. And then you get a channel lock and a wrench. You do it smarter, and look, safety. But a lot of people are just like, well, why don't you just screw it harder with your hand? And it's just like, that's not going to work. And it's a small example, but I love what you described about sometimes the greatest leverage is it's way easier. Another example from this birthday party you should laugh at, I hope, is I had to blow up 100 balloons in a short period of time. So what did I do? I didn't, do it by hand and have my lungs give out, because that would have been terrible, worse than running like a half marathon probably. I just had a machine and there was a tool that came in. You just wrap it around and I could do 2 or 3 balloons a minute. Look at that. I didn't work harder. I had more leverage. So I'm off my pedestal on leverage versus effort, but I completely agree.
But also, I just want to touch on this, Ross. You're doing this because you have so much experience, right? Like the experience that you have working over the years. You've been in it, what, 20 years like me? We are quite the same, right? We've been
Feels
doing
like
it
it.
for so long. Exactly, right? So it comes easy, like to me too. Like I'm like, it comes so easy to me. The fractional CMO truly is a pleasure. Like I wake up in the morning, cannot wait. Cannot wait to work with my clients on fractional CMO initiatives. And because it comes easy, but not for most, I would say the one, I mean, it comes easy because of the experience that we have. And also, I think, you worked with a PE firm or a VC firm. So you've had access to a lot of different companies, different business models over the years, right? You've learned so much from it. Same for me. I've worked with over 120 companies that wanted to grow and exit over the years. From startups to scale ups to growth to mature to Fortune 500. So I have worked with all of them over the years. And so we have quite a lot of experience, accumulated a lot of experience over the years.
And it's not like, so I had parents that did the career track they were in for 30 years, right? They love what they did. But if you don't do it for different people, so like my mother, bless her, she loved to drive school bus and be around kids. And it's like each year was the same as the last year with different children on the bus, but the skill development, perhaps she got more friendly, safer at driving, like those were the KPIs. Like it was the same year repeated. And many marketers or people in corporate, we need these people to exist, but they repeat the same year after year. It might get slightly more efficient or might become easier because it's a forced repetition. But I find that fractional CMOs, and maybe you'd agree, I grow every time I do a new challenge. There's novel experience. So no 2 years have been remotely the same in my career. And I would attribute that to making it more fun and easy to solve new challenges for clients versus if I were just somebody that wrote blog posts for every year of my career in the last, 15, 20 years, I'm sure that any new challenge would be stressful. It's like, no, no, give me a blog post to write.
No, I would agree. I would agree. I really welcome a new client, supporting a new client, getting to learn their business model, how to, again, like about them, about their own objective, what's the vision for their business, right? And why they want to create something greater than themselves. What's the true why? And how we're going to be able to communicate that in a way that's going to make them stand out, make the company stand out, but also the leadership stand out and their value system. So I would agree with that completely. And I like to challenge myself, and that's why I like to take on new clients all the time.
I agree with that as well. And that's why what I do looks so much different than when I started as a fractional CMO is because I've learned from every client that I've taken on. Something has given me market feedback of like, okay, this communication approach probably doesn't work with this target avatar. Or, this industry, what the plays that might have worked for a totally different industry don't apply to this. Those lessons along the way are are invaluable, but they're also like what makes me not want to like switch the path, right? So anyway, great conversation. I want to now pivot to a part of the conversation that I alluded to prior to our podcast, which is leave a question, ask a question. Speaking of novel ideas. So I'll start with asking you a question the previous guest has for you without having any background. And then you have the opportunity to ask the next guest any question you'd like. Sound good? Here we go. What's been the most impactful thing someone has said to you that has changed your worldview or your view on business?
Okay, there's a few. So most recently, an old client reached out to me, the CO. I was an interim CMO for 9 months. I really worked on change management more than anything, looking at the marketing team, assessing where they're at. And with that, we looked at the product, of course, but also customer success. And so I was not leading the customer success team, but the COO was. And the CEO really wanted to reach out to me. And she said, Stephanie, I really want to reach out to you because, I never got to say thank you. I said, really? I worked with you and explained to you what the marketing does and how we're supporting, the customer success teams. I know you don't realize. You don't realize that you've given me a piece of advice for my team on how to train my team that has changed completely my team and our success as a company, like how to onboard new clients, how to speak to, and so that was a very nice, it was yeah. I don't know if it's changed my life, but it's nice to hear that, I can make an impact greater than just the marketing and communication function, even that's what I was really directing and owning. So that was very nice.
Love that. What question do you have for the next guest?
So I would say the my question for the next case, and we alluded to this quite a bit, is how do you communicate the impact of strategy to owners who only think short term? And this is a conversation I have constantly with strategic channel partners that I have around me, right? Like I work with strategic sales, fractional sales officers. They want to lead through strategy, planning, execution, and aligning sales with other functions, right? And so I think for me, yeah, so that's where I'm coming from. How do you communicate the value of long term, of investing in strategy when the executive team only wants to see short term wins?
That's the
This is
question.
something I know you and I have talked about, right?
I
Like it's
I have I have can tell you a bunch of ways not to do it, and it really depends on who. I think this question is something that anyone that would be a fractional CMO or any trusted advisor should ask every time they get a new client or a different engagement, because I think that it's so context and case dependent. One of the most successful times I've communicated the value of fractional CMO versus production is when I asked a guy, "Hey, do you want to have this same kind of stress in 5 years?" He's like, "No." I said, "Okay, aside from any other financial metric, or success metric, what do you want to do in 5 years that you think that you can't do today?" And the answer was, "I want to be able to visit my grandkids whenever I want." I was like, oh, "Okay, so what?" We then change the marketing strategy to help you sell the business versus to reduce your cost of acquisition and increase your uptake velocity of new customers. And he's like, "Huh, so get paid for the exit and then not have to worry about this ever again." And one of the hardest communications I've had with a client was, "Hey, you want equally your 10-year target of tripling your business, and at the same time you want every week to hit your anticipated sales goal, while at the same time growing your marketing channels subscribership and metrics. You want all of these metrics to obtain all at the same time, and we can't make a commitment on prioritization where like some weeks sales might be down in order to invest in long-term growth, or long-term growth might stall and be slower if we focus on the short term." So getting people to choose priority is maybe one of the hardest things, because it's hard, I think, to get at what people really want if it's always changing. It's hard to hit a moving target. So how do you get that North Star? Love that question. I know I'm gonna be thinking about that one. Way less pensive question for you, Stephanie, is where can people get in touch and find out more about you and what you have going with Pace?
So LinkedIn is probably the best way to reach out to me. Well, you can find me as Stephanie, like LinkedIn. I think it's Stephanie Curtis with an F. So you can find me on LinkedIn with my name, or on the website at creativepace.com. Those are the main ways to get in touch with me.
Very cool. Well, thank you for your time, Stephanie. It was absolutely a pleasure. And thank you, everyone listening. I wouldn't be a marketer if I didn't have at least one call to action. And that is, if you found value in the conversation and you know somebody else who would, please share it with a friend. Until next time, be well.